Hey guys, thanks for coming back and watching another video. Today's video is going to be all about these right here, these delicious berries, which I absolutely love, strawberries, and how you propagate them. And the three ways I know how to propagate them are from these little runners right here, from dividing the plant itself through division, and finally I will do some strawberry cuttings from the fruit, where I will actually take the seeds and will produce new plants from seeds. So there are three ways I know of, and there's also three types of strawberry plants I know of. So the three types of strawberries that exist are the June bearing, the ever bearing, and the day neutral. Now the June berry is going to be an early summer fruit producer, and they pretty much were going to produce that one time in early summer. For me, it's June. And then you have the ever bearing, which is going to produce in the spring, early summer, and in the fall. Some people say they bloom throughout the summer, but depending on the heat factors, and there are some heat factors that can slow production, if the heat gets above 85 degrees, those will not produce all the way through summer. Now, the everbearing is going to produce from the beginning of the season all the way to the end, from spring all the way till October. And that's a very unique variety, and that's the one I want to plant. Also, one more thing to remember with the everbearing, temperatures outside, if it gets too hot, again, above 85 degrees, the production can come to a slow or almost complete stop. So that's one thing to remember. If you're wondering why your strawberries have stopped producing, it could be excessive heat. Now, for your strawberries to produce their absolute best, you're going to want a really good soil. That's a huge part of strawberry production. They want to be in well-draining soil. Now, this particular soil I've created myself through my recipe. I'll put a link at the top that tells you how to make this soil. It's a lot cheaper, up to 75% cheaper than what you're going to get in the big box store in the bags. But this is what I call a moisture retaining soil mix. And if you buy the Miracle-Gro brand, it's going to be about 20 bucks a bag, and so you can make it for 75% less if you do it yourself. That's one thing to remember, is you want it to be well draining, you want it to contain manure, and you want it to have some fertilizer mixed into the soil, and that's extremely important to get your strawberries off to a best possible start, so you'll be able to have strawberries this summer. For your strawberries to perform their best, you're going to want to test the soil with a pH meter, and these two pH meters, I've got one that's digital, and they both require batteries, but this is digital, and this is more of an analog, older pH meter that I have. And so that's something very important. You want to test the soil. The soil, optimum soil pH is going to be between 6.0 and 7.5. So that's something you can do early on to prevent your strawberries from failing. So you want to make sure that that's the case. I'll put links up for both of these, but these are a critical step in making your strawberries are going to produce this year and next year, all the way through their life cycle, up to about 4 to 5 years when they start to fade. And that's the other thing is important, taking about divisions, cuttings, and seeds, is you're always producing new plants, so you don't have to worry about going out and buying those expensive plants at the store. Now, for your strawberry plants to consistently produce strawberries, you're going to need moisture, and you don't want it to be the soil to be soggy, but you want it to be consistently moist. If you have a irrigation system in place, this is what you can change out to. I changed my entire overspray irrigation system to a micro irrigation system, and I think this is the best way to do it because you can deliver water directly to the plant. My watering schedule went from 10 or 15 minutes down to 1 to 2 minutes per day. And so this right here is a key. This is a rubber hose that comes with the drip irrigation system. This brand is Mr. Landscaper, and it's the best one that I've ever found. The one that you buy in a lot of kits is a heavy, hard to deal with, thick vinyl that doesn't, it's not easy. Once this heats up, this is very easy to maneuver and to position. But the thick vinyl one that comes with a lot of the kits is very difficult to work with. It's not flexible, and even when it's heated, it doesn't want to bend in shape in your garden. So this is the best one, made by Mr. Landscaper. I'll try to put a link in here. I think it was on Amazon I purchased it, but over the years I've purchased so much of this. Some of it came from eBay, some of it came from Amazon, and I think Mr. Landscaper may have their own website, but the easiest way for me to get it if I need it is just Amazon. I can have it to me like that. So anyways, that is a key about strawberries. If you want them to keep producing, whatever variety you have, whether it's the early or full season or just ever bearing, that's what you want to do, is you want to make sure that you're watering properly. If you're not, you're going to have strawberry plants, but not a lot of healthy strawberries coming out. So that's one thing to remember. is watering is critical. So the next thing to talk about is light requirements. And for the strawberries to perform their best, you're going to want a minimum of 6 hours of direct sunlight. 6 to 8 hours is really best. In my zone 7A, our summers can become extremely hot. So the shade fabric in the hotter months, maybe end of July, August, we might want to put in some 50% shade fabric over there to protect the strawberries. But if you're in a zone higher than that, then you probably don't have to worry about it. But for me, I do have to sometimes install shade fabric, and that's a whole different process. I can make a video about that showing how I actually do the shade fabric. It's not that complicated. But remember, you can't plant these in shade if you want strawberries. The plant itself may survive, but you're not going to have strawberries. Now, the 3 methods of propagation, I like the one that we're talking about first, which is propagating from these runners. Is so much easier to do that. There's a couple of rules you have to follow when propagating from runners, because if you take the runners too soon, it's going to fail and it's not going to produce a new plant. But this is how the mother plant produces new strawberry plants. It sends out runners. So we're going to do that first. We're going to head out to the garden, and I'm going to show you a mother plant that already has a runner that's established itself right next to the parent plant. Now, ultimately, that second plant is going to grow too close to the mother plant, so we're going to remove that, and I'll show you that entire process. So first thing we're going to have to do is use this and go outside. Did you ever see the episode of In Living Color where Jim Carrey is a martial arts expert and he's trying to teach people how to defend against a knife attack? If you get a chance, watch that on YouTube. It's absolutely hilarious. So guys, as you can see, this is a healthy mother plant, and it's got a few bad leaves on it, but it's just from the extreme heat we've had lately. And it's always a good idea to prune these off and just toss them away or put them into your compost bin. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our hori hori knife, or in Japan it's hori hori. They pronounce their R's like D's. But anyways, try not to cut into our irrigation system that I was just referring to. That is what I was talking about earlier that waters these plants. And so we actually have more than one mother plant sending these out. But what we want to do is we want to cut around the area where we have our runner that's established itself. Now this, like I said earlier, it already has roots in it. So we're going to carefully remove this from the ground so we can repot it into a new container. And it's okay to cut if you'll look closely, you'll see the mother's, I guess you would call it an umbilical cord to the runner. It's already established itself, so we don't have to worry. It doesn't need this anymore. So we're going to cut this off. And now we have a new strawberry plant that's ready to go. I'm just going to carefully try to pull this out of the ground. And it looks like this plant has actually already sent out runners to a second plant, so I'll take that as well. But that is the plant, and you can see it has a nice root system there. And so we'll go back in the greenhouse or the potting shed, and we'll pot this up and start the life of a new strawberry. So one more thing I want to talk about here is you're probably wondering what this white powder is. This is actually something that I've added recently to keep ants away from my strawberry plant. I created a video, I'll link it at the top, but this is a great way. It's one of the most safest ways or safest products you can use as an insecticide, and you don't have to worry about getting it on your hands. It's non-toxic, and I highly recommend that form of using insect control because it just works so much better, and you don't have to worry about contaminating your produce that you're going to consume. Okay, so one rule of thumb you're going to want to remember to do, if you're just taking one, maybe two runner cuttings, then this is not really applicable. But if you're wanting to do a lot of these at one time, you're going to want some kind of tray with wet paper towels in there. So you want to make sure these don't dry out. If you have a lot of runners, like 10, 20, 30, you're going to want to make sure you maybe even cover them with another wet paper towel just to make sure they don't dry out, because they get really hot, and I'm assuming you're going to be taking this at the end of summer when the runners are the most active, and some of them have actually established themselves. A critical rule in taking runners is to make sure there's some roots forming. Now I'm going to bring in closer and show you what's happening with these runners as opposed to this one that's already established itself and actually sent out its own runner. So from the mother plant, we had a first runner come out. This is all from this year's growth. this one first, and then it sent out a second runner from its umbilical cord and created a second runner. So that's great on that, but these that are in the pots have, this one specifically has not matured enough to make its own runners that are ready to be snipped off and started over. But there's another process you can use to turn these into plants a little quicker. This one has no runners whatsoever. It's just a little bit younger plant, and although it's got some beautiful flowers and I actually see some fruit forming, it's not mature enough and it hasn't sent runners out. So that's one of the things, is the easiest way is these runners are the key to producing plants. And I'm still going to go over the other methods, but I just want to make sure you remember there's two rules. I'm going to bring in closer and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. Now on this particular runner that has came out from my potted strawberry plant, if you look closely, there's a couple of small nodes here, and those nodes will eventually become roots, but this one is not ready to be snipped. It needs to be placed next to the plant and pinned down. You need to pin it down with some type of piece of wire, something to hold it up against the soil, so those nodes will start forming their own root system. Once that's established, you give it a little tug and it has its root systems in place. Then you can snip it, but until you do that, this runner is not ready to cut. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate exactly how to do this, and I'm going to move my potted strawberry plant. I'm hoping I'm still in camera. I'll have to double check that. But these are landscape pins. And so basically when you're putting on landscape fabric to prevent weeds, you use these. I don't use landscape fabric anymore, but I do still have the pins from many, many years ago, probably 20, these are probably 20 years old. So what you want to do is you want to set the runner, you just want it to touch the soil. You're going to come in with whatever thing you have, metal, clip, whatever, and you're going to push that into the soil so that the runner is held securely in contact with the soil, and that will help that runner to establish its root system. Now some runners you'll see already have a small root system forming. They're reaching for the soil. They're trying to find the soil. So that's really tells you how aggressive strawberries can reproduce and spread out almost like weeds. That's one thing to remember, is to speed up this process, just use some type of metal clip, whatever you have, and just to secure it to the soil, so that way that little runner, the base of it, is constantly in contact with the soil so it can form its own root system. Okay, I've got a little bit better imagery here, so I'm hoping you can see it a little bit better. I just want to make sure it's really clear how to do this because it's not hard at all. So that's the first one we just did. The first runner we've secured to the soil. And here's the second runner. Now there's no roots forming, and I'm trying to see if there's any nodes. I see a couple of nodes. They're very, very small. So I'm going to just apply these into the soil, touch it firmly, and then I'm going to put in my landscape pin and push it down so that it doesn't move around, so that it's secured to the soil. So that way if I'm washing, if the plant moves around, whatever, it's secure, and those roots have got a really secure base to start forming. This is the third runner. Again, I see a couple of nodes and it looks like the beginning formation of a root, but I'm going to do the same thing, and it looks like the same thing. It's trying to send out another root, another runner there. So I'm going to put this into the soil, just touch it. You don't have to bury it. You just want to make it contact with the soil. Our third landscape pin, I'm going to try to make it where you can see that. So we have 3 additional plants about to form from this one plant. So that is how you're going to propagate from this type of method, and it's so much cheaper than going out and buying new plants for $4 or $5 or $6. It's just a lot easier to propagate them like this. And like I said previously, the lifespan of one of these plants, its productive lifespan, is only about 4 to 5 years before the production of strawberries starts to fade. So you're going to want to always be doing this process, creating new plants, so you never have to buy new plants again. So basically you're just doing set it and forget it right there. And that's a line I stole from Ron Popeil. If anybody out there knows who that is, he was a world-class salesman, but I still want my money back for that fishing rod that broke after 2 weeks. Okay, so this is going to be 4 plants from one, or 3 additional plants from the one, and it's ready to go back into the garden. I'm going to put the micro irrigation, when I get back outside, I'm going to install my micro irrigation, so this plant will be watered once every day. I'm hoping that this plant right here has enough time to send out some runners so I can do the same thing, but I think we are less than 2 months now from our first frost, so unless I bring these into the greenhouse, which I'll probably do, if you were going to leave these outside, you're probably going to have them go dormant and nothing will happen again until next spring. And there's nothing wrong with leaving them outside. It's a perennial, so it's going to come back and do even better every year up until that fourth or fifth year there. Okay, so this is an overpriced pot I never used. It's been sitting in the garden. I'd planned on doing something with it, but I just never did. But it does have a rather large drainage hole. You can see it there. I'm going to use this bonsai mesh to prevent the soil from falling out. So I'm just going to put one of these in there. If you don't have a bonsai mesh, you can use a just standard some window screen cut into a small piece, or you can use a paper towel folded in half or quadruple folded, and that will prevent, it'll allow water to go through, but it will stop the soil from falling out or getting washed out every time you water it. So I'm going to fill this with the homemade potting mix. As I mentioned before, there's a video in my video series about how to make your own homemade potting mix. I think I linked it earlier, so I won't do it again. But we're going to do that, and then I'm going to show you how to plant these 2 runners to make their own pot. And I'll probably keep this a little closer to the house, but I just want to make sure that it's still also under irrigation until that first frost happens. Okay, so I'm going to examine the first runner and take a look at it. Looks fine. I don't see any major issues with it. It's got a few leaves that probably need to be removed, so I'm going to, and if you're wondering again what that, maybe didn't miss that part, the white stuff is just a natural insecticide. I'm going to separate these 2 by cutting in the middle of the runner. And so now we're just working with 1 runner, and I think we may have a little bit of damage on this one, so we're going to cut that leaf off. And examine the other leaves. It looks like this one could probably be removed. There's a small leaf forming, so that looks fine. I'm going to spread these across the pot so they're not right next to each other, because they do expand over time. And this one maybe need to be cut as well. Looks like there's a lot of new leaves, a lot of new shoots planning on coming in there. Now what I'm going to do, I see 2 strawberries beginning to form here. I want it to focus on creating roots, and so I want to remove those. And so now we're just down to the plant and its roots and its leaves. And I think this leaf needs to be removed as well. Maybe just because of the sun and the extreme heat we've had. So I'm just going to put that on one side and bury this extremely well-draining potting mix is just perfect. You don't want to put the crown under the soil. You just want to put it right at soil level. So we're burying the roots, but we're not burying the entire crown. We're just putting it right at soil surface. I'm going to press down firmly so it'll be able to stand on its own. Keep pressing there until the roots are firmly in the soil. I'm going to do the same thing with a second runner. Like we've got 1 leaf here that needs to be removed, and I don't see any berries on this one. It's a lot younger than the first runner, so I think this one's ready to go into the soil. Clean the soil a little bit there, and just put them on opposite sides of the planter. The irrigation, the micro irrigation, will go right into the center of the pot, so I don't have to worry about that for a while. And I'm sorry about the lighting in the potting shed. It's not as good as the greenhouse, but I just thought I'd work in here today. All right, so we have two that are ready to go. I am going to do one more thing that I may have neglected to mention on the first 2, but I'm going to put in a dusting of peat moss, and then I'm going to top it with some very finely shredded pine bark just to hold in the moisture. Okay, so this is just a standard peat moss. I'm just going to sprinkle it around the top of the pot. I'm just going to put it all around the plants. Strawberries do like it to be a little bit on the acidic side, so I'm putting maybe 1/4 of an inch once I spread it out throughout the pot, and that's going to bring up the acidity just a little bit. The last thing I'm going to do is add in that pine bark, and this will be ready to go out into the garden. All right, I'm going to just spread out some pine bark on the top here, and this is, I keep it in these old watered bottles that I recycle, and it just makes it easier for me to work in the potting shed. So that's going to be about 1/4 of an inch once I spread it out. That's going to keep in moisture and stop any type of, if there was any weed seeds on the top of that soil mix that shouldn't have been, but if there was, that will help prevent any just sudden weed explosion there in my pot, so it won't be competing for nutrients and moisture with my strawberries. I want to make sure I brush back that from the base of the plant. I don't want the strawberry plant to be under the soil level, so I just want to make sure that the crown of each runner is exposed to the air and not under the soil. So that's it. That's the method of taking runners from your mother plant and turning it into new strawberry plants. If you don't want to buy strawberry plants, this is the method to do to keep it going. But I'm going to cover two other methods real quickly and we'll move on. So the next method of propagating strawberries you would think would be the easiest, but it is the most time consuming. And to take a seed from a strawberry, you're talking about 4 to 6 weeks before it starts to germinate and produce where you see any results. So this would be my least favorite method. I think it's difficult, but if you want to try it, there's nothing wrong with trying, but I just don't prefer this method. But I'll show you, I've done it before, but it has been a long time. So I'll bring you in close and show you what I'm doing, and we'll just take the strawberry seeds directly from freshly picked strawberries. So the thing about taking the strawberry seeds directly from the strawberry, some people say slice them really thin and put them in a Ziploc bag, put them out in the sun and let them dehydrate. That's really not necessary. You just want to slice it very thin. That's where your seeds are. And you're going to put it in a tray. And I'm just going to keep doing this over and over with these strawberries until I fill the tray. Now, the strawberries will not be true to type more than likely. It's probably a hybrid, and you're going to end up with a third type of strawberry, maybe not the two parent plants. So if you pick them yourself, like I said, it's probably going to be a hybrid. If they came from the grocery store, it's probably going to be a hybrid. So that's what you're going to want to do. You want to go through, cut them very thin. The next thing you're going to do is just dust it with a seed starting mix. It's going to need something called cold stratification, which is just a fancy way of saying you're going to want to put these in the fridge for a few weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, probably 2 weeks is fine. But once you do that and bring them back out into the garden, make sure they're moist and they're evenly moist. You'll give it some time, but like I say, from the time you take it out of the fridge, it's probably going to be 4 to 6 weeks before you see strawberries. So that's the second method after taking the runners. I think this method takes a lot longer. It is very possible to do it. A lot of people are successful with doing it, and there's nothing wrong with doing seeds. I just personally prefer taking the runners. And the third method, we'll head back out to the garden and show you the last method, and then we'll finish up there. Okay guys, so here we are back in the bed, and I'm sorry about the cicadas. They are going crazy. So this is the micro irrigation system that I'd referred to earlier, and so this is what's going to keep the strawberry plant healthy. I'm just going to put one in each pot and make sure that the irrigation system is active, and I'm going to have to come back and add the shredded pine bark to each one of these to help it hold in moisture. But I just wanted to show you the process of watering and how I do it. It makes it a lot easier. If you don't have any type of irrigation system, you can get what's called a soaker hose. It's a hose that you cut on, and it slowly lets water just come out of the hose. It actually bleeds through the skin of the hose, so you'll see water coming out, and it works very well, and you can put that into your garden. So if you don't have any kind of irrigation system and you want even moisture, try a soaker hose. You can look that up, and I'll put a link to one in the video. But these are hopefully going to do well until our first frost, and then they'll go back into the greenhouse. I will have to bring them out and let them go through a little bit of a cold stratification so they'll do well next year. So they do need that 2-week period of cold. Just want to make sure I said that out loud. They need a little bit of cold each year, but I don't want them to spend all winter outdoors. Okay, again, I'm going to just add this really finely shredded pine bark to both potted strawberries. And that's just, like I said earlier, moisture control, weed barrier, and maybe even a little bit of nutrition. It might actually make the soil slightly more acidic, which is what strawberries like. So I'm going to do this to both potted plants, and then I'll give you a small demonstration of how the irrigation system works. Same thing on the second pot, and we'll start talking about the third method of propagating strawberries. It's fine. It's just similar to hosta. It's called division. I don't really want to divide one today, but I will talk about it and show you how you can do it. But it's very hot, and I don't want to cause transplant shock. This is something you'd probably want to do in the springtime or maybe later in the fall. It's still late summer here, so I don't want to divide any right now because it might cause the death of the plant. But these two are ready to go. I'm going to quickly demonstrate how the irrigation works, and then we'll move on to talking about dividing the strawberry plant. Okay, guys, so we're losing daylight quickly, so I wanted to go over this. This is a more mature strawberry plant that was planted early in the year, early springtime, and it's done quite well. It's produced a lot of strawberries. But what we're talking about, and it's like it's still got strawberries in production, is dividing one of these plants. Once they pass the 1 year mark, you can dig them up and you can separate the roots just like you would in like a hosta or something like that. You're just going to carefully tease it apart and um, break the root system into two, and so you go from having one plant to two plants. Is also an okay method of propagation, but I personally prefer the runner method. I think it's the easiest and the fastest way to produce new plants. And I personally, I don't like disturbing the plant because it's got that 4 to 5 year life cycle, and it's going to do great if you follow all of these methods of growing strawberries. You'll have good harvest year after year until it sees its final year and it starts to go into decline and eventually die. So they're great plants. They're almost like weeds. They spread so quickly. So this is the three methods I know of propagation, and I think that I would always recommend the runner method. So that's it for today. Okay, guys, it's time to water my strawberry in this quite overpriced pot. This was actually meant to be a flower pot for a really nice flower. So I just want to say, if I don't drop it here, I want to say thanks for watching, and I really appreciate every subscriber. I really enjoy reading the comments, and I've already learned a few things from people giving me some advice. So that's really well appreciated, and I want to thank you for that. If you haven't subscribed, please do. I love seeing those subscriber numbers go up, and I love reading, like I said, I love reading each and every comment. If you have any questions, please leave them. I'll do my best to answer it in the most accurate way possible. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who has subscribed. Sorry, it's been a long day and I'm really tired. Have a great day.